On the alien planet of Zereth, humanity was a name whispered in fear and anger. For generations, the Zerethians had been taught that humans were an unforgiving species, capable of destroying anything in their path. The stories passed down through the elders were filled with horror and dread, painting humans as ruthless invaders, destroying entire worlds with their advanced technology and merciless armies. It was said that humans didn't value life as the Zerethians did, that they would kill anything in their way, and they couldn't be trusted. In the heart of the bustling city of Kilara, nestled beneath towering crystalline structures, there was an ancient school that educated the youngest Zerethians. Today was an important day, one that would forever change the way they viewed the outside universe. In a classroom filled with curious young eyes, the teacher stood before a holographic screen, displaying an image of Earth, the birthplace of the human race. "This is Earth," the teacher's voice rang clear, though it was laced with fear. "A planet full of humans. They are the most dangerous creatures known to exist. They have destroyed countless civilizations and enslaved those who were weaker than them." The children looked up in awe, their wide eyes reflecting both fear and fascination. Some were too young to fully understand the stories they had been told, while others were already beginning to feel the weight of the tales from their elders. The teacher's words were meant to instill a sense of caution, to protect them from the outside world. One small child, Aaron, raised his hand timidly. "But why do they hurt others? Why do they destroy everything?" The teacher paused. His face softened for a moment, but the fear in his eyes was hard to hide. "That is what we do not understand. But we know they are not to be trusted. The humans are different. They think only of their own survival, and they are willing to do anything to ensure it." Aaron looked at his classmates, his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't understand. Why would someone, anyone, be so cruel? Wasn't there a better way? But the teacher's words stuck with him, and soon he found himself too afraid to question any further. The stories made sense in the way that a nightmare does, familiar and terrifying, a part of their reality. The hologram on the screen flickered, shifting to a dark, apocalyptic scene. Human soldiers advancing through the rubble of a once thriving alien city. The smoke rose into the air, and the ground was littered with the remains of those who had tried to resist. The images were haunting. The children couldn't take their eyes off of them, their young minds absorbing the fear, the hopelessness. "In our history," the teacher continued, "the humans came to this very galaxy, and they destroyed everything in their path. It was only by sheer luck that we, the Zerethians, survived. They attacked many worlds, worlds that had no defense. But we are safe now. We've learned how to protect ourselves. We've kept ourselves hidden." Aaron shuddered as the image faded, replaced with a serene picture of Zereth's beautiful landscape, bathed in the soft light of their twin suns. The teacher's words filled the silence in the room. "We must always remember, never let our guard down. Humanity is dangerous, and they will stop at nothing to take what they want." The children sat in silence, their minds reeling from the weight of what they had just been told. Some clutched their small arms nervously. Others cast furtive glances at the windows, as if expecting the terrifying humans to appear at any moment. Outside, the sun was setting, casting an eerie orange glow over the city's skyline. The vast towers of Kilara stretched upward, glimmering under the fading sunlight. The streets were alive with the soft hum of alien crafts, moving gracefully through the air as if they had always belonged there. But in the hearts of the Zerethians, a darker thought began to grow, one that could not easily be shaken. What if the humans came? What if they were not safe after all? Aaron turned to his best friend, Lyra, who sat beside him, her wide eyes reflecting the same fear. "Do you think the humans will come for us?" Lyra hesitated, glancing nervously around the room. "I don't know," she whispered, "but if they do, we need to be ready. We can't let them hurt us." Aaron nodded, but deep down, something gnawed at him. He didn't understand the fear. The humans, If they were truly as terrible as the stories made them out to be, why had they never come for them? Why hadn't they destroyed the peaceful planets that had been in their way? He didn't have answers. And so, the fear of humanity took root deep inside him, like a seed planted in the soil of doubt and uncertainty. As the lesson ended, the children slowly filed out of the classroom, each of them lost in their own thoughts. Aaron couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The fear that had been instilled in them seemed too absolute, too final. And yet, he couldn't help but wonder if there was more to the story, something they weren't being told. That night, as Aaron lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling, he couldn't stop thinking about the humans. Were they really the monsters the Zerithians had been taught to fear? Or was there something else? Something that no one had ever dared to speak about? As the stars twinkled outside his window, Aaron drifted into a restless sleep, haunted by the unknown. And little did he know, his world was about to be turned upside down by one brave human, whose actions would change the course of their lives forever. The night had fallen over Zyrith like a heavy blanket. The city of Kilara, usually bustling with activity, was now shrouded in an eerie quiet. The streets were empty, and the usual hum of alien crafts had dwindled into silence. It was the kind of silence that felt almost unnatural, like the calm before a storm. Aaron lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling, still haunted by the stories of humans that filled his mind. He rolled over, trying to shake off the unease that had settled deep within him. The teacher's words, the holograms of destruction, the warnings, it all played in a loop in his thoughts. He couldn't help but wonder, what if it was true? What if humans really were out there, waiting for the right moment to strike? Suddenly, the soft hum of a craft broke the silence. Aaron's heart skipped a beat. He bolted upright, his breath quickening. It wasn't unusual for crafts to fly at night, but this one sounded different. The usual drones and vehicles that flew above Kilara made a high-pitched hum, a smooth, rhythmic sound. But this one was lower, heavier, like it was struggling to stay aloft. He could feel it in his chest, the pressure of the craft's low rumble. Aaron jumped out of bed, his bare feet cold against the floor. He rushed to his window and peered out into the night. His eyes widened in disbelief. There, hovering above the city, was a strange, large craft. It wasn't one of theirs. The sleek, rounded design was nothing like the graceful shapes of Zerithian ships. The craft was battered, scorched in places, and its movements were erratic. It looked like it had been through a war. His heart pounded. Could this be it? Could this be a human ship? The craft drifted lower, closer to the ground. Aaron's breath caught in his throat as it slowly descended, landing in a quiet corner of the city, far from the heart of Kilara. He felt the urge to run, to hide, but something held him in place. Fear and curiosity tugged at him. He watched, wide-eyed, as the ship's hatch opened with a groan. For a moment, nothing happened. The darkness seemed to swallow the scene, and Aaron could hear nothing but his own rapid breathing. But then, from the shadows, a figure appeared. At first, it was just a silhouette, a human-like shape, tall and imposing, its outline barely visible in the dim light. Aaron's heart raced. He had never seen a human before, but the stories of their terror were all he needed to know. This was the moment he had feared. The figure stepped forward, and Aaron's breath caught in his throat. It was a man, human, no doubt, but something about him was different. He was hunched, his body battered, and the way he moved seemed strained, like he was fighting to stay upright. His clothes were torn, and his face was covered in dirt and blood. But it was his eyes that struck Aaron the most. They were wide and desperate. But there was something else, something that Aaron had not expected to see in the eyes of a feared enemy. There was vulnerability, pain, and hope. The human staggered toward the city's entrance, and Aaron could see that he was holding something in his arms, a small bundle. It wasn't clear at first what it was, But as the human came closer, Aaron realized that the man was cradling one of the Zerethian children, a small girl. She was unconscious, her tiny body limp in his arms. Aaron's heart skipped a beat. The human was carrying one of their own. The man finally reached the entrance to Kilara, where the security guards stood watching from the distance. They were alert, weapons drawn, eyes scanning the stranger with suspicion and fear. The tension in the air was palpable, and Aaron could feel the growing sense of dread in his chest. The guards shouted at the human, demanding that he stop, that he identify himself. But the human didn't seem to hear them. His movements were slow, each step a struggle. His face was pale, and sweat beaded on his forehead. Aaron's mind raced. What was happening? The human dropped to his knees, the small child still clutched tightly in his arms. His chest heaved with effort as he gasped for air. The guards shouted again, moving closer, but the human said something that stopped them in their tracks. His voice was weak, but his words were clear, piercing the air like a dagger. "I came to save her," the human said, his voice trembling. "I'll die for her, but she's worth it." Aaron's blood ran cold. This was no attack. This was no invasion. The human was offering his life for one of them, for one of their children. The guards hesitated. The words seemed to hang in the air like a heavy fog. Aaron could see their confusion, their disbelief. They had been taught that humans were nothing but monsters, and yet here one was, on his knees, giving his life for an alien child. Aaron didn't know what to think. He had been told that humans were dangerous, that they couldn't be trusted. But now, in front of him, was an image that didn't fit with anything he had ever been taught. The human soldier, weak and bloodied, managed to lift his head and look at the guards. There was no anger in his eyes, no malice, just a deep, quiet desperation. I'm not here to fight. I'm here to protect." The words echoed in Aaron's mind, and a chill ran down his spine. Could it be? Could this human really be telling the truth? As the scene unfolded, Aaron felt his heart shift. The fear he had carried for so long was now mixing with something else, something far more powerful. He didn't understand it, but he knew one thing for sure. The human soldier had arrived with a purpose, and that purpose was to protect them. The air in Kilara was thick with tension. The human soldier lay on the ground, clutching the small Zerethian child in his arms. His body was battered, his breath shallow, but his eyes, those eyes, were filled with a quiet, unyielding resolve. He was no longer the terrifying figure of doom that the Zerethians had been taught to fear. He was something else entirely, a symbol of sacrifice, of a courage they had never imagined could come from a human. Aaron stood there, frozen in place, watching as the guards approached the soldier. The alien child, still unconscious, lay safely in his arms. The human's face was pale, but there was no regret in his eyes, only the calm determination of someone who knew they had already made their choice. "Who are you?" one of the guards shouted, his voice trembling with both fear and confusion. He was still aiming his weapon at the human, unsure whether to trust him or not. The human didn't answer right away. His chest rose and fell with shallow breaths, each one seeming like it could be his last. But after a long pause, he spoke, his voice cracking as he tried to gather strength. "My name is Captain Thorn," he said weakly, his words barely above a whisper. "I came from Earth to save her." He looked down at the child in his arms, his expression softening with a look of love and sorrow. The guards exchanged nervous glances. The Zerethians were no strangers to fear, but this was something different. Here was a human, standing before them, not as an invader, but as a protector. The human soldier had broken every preconceived notion they had ever held about his species. Aaron watched as the guard hesitated, the weapon lowering slightly, but still, the doubt lingered in the air. The stories, the warnings, they all came rushing back to him. Humans were dangerous. They could not be trusted. But Captain Thorn's actions didn't fit the mold of their stories. Aaron felt something stirring deep inside him. something that both terrified and inspired him. "I'm not here to fight," Captain Thorne continued, his voice barely audible. "I've been told that you were told to fear us. But I need you to understand. My people are not all the same. We're not all monsters. I came to save her. And now, I need you to trust me." The Zerethian guards stood in stunned silence. What was happening here? This was not the invasion they had feared, nor was it the bloodthirsty assault they had been warned about. Instead, it was the quiet act of a man, willing to give his life for the sake of a child he didn't even know. The stillness was broken by the sudden roar of engines in the distance. A shadow loomed overhead as a fleet of Zerethian warships appeared in the sky, their sleek forms cutting through the air like blades of lightning. Aaron's heart raced as the ships descended, their weapons ready. They had come to protect their planet, but it was clear now that the true threat wasn't the human soldier in front of them. The real danger was closer than they thought. "I don't have much time," Captain Thorne said, his voice growing weaker. He looked at the child in his arms once more before meeting the eyes of the guards. "The fleet coming is not Zerethian." Aaron's eyes widened. "Not Zerethian." The soldier's face contorted with pain as he struggled to sit up. His eyes flicked towards the ships above, his expression filled with a mixture of dread and determination. "They're coming for all of you," Captain Thorne rasped. "They're coming to take your planet. But I've been sent here to stop them. I can't fight the entire fleet, but I can buy you time. Please, take her and go. You have to trust me." Aaron's mind raced. What was he saying? The Zerethian guards, still uncertain, began to form a loose circle around the soldier. The fleet above grew closer, their weapons powered up, ready to strike. But Captain Thorne didn't flinch. His gaze remained fixed on the approaching threat, even as his strength continued to wane. He looked back at the child one last time, his expression softening with sorrow. "I'll never forget you," he whispered, as if speaking directly to her, though she couldn't hear him. Aaron's heart ached as he watched the human soldier slowly rise to his feet. He had no weapon, no defense, but the soldier still walked toward the looming threat, a single figure against an entire fleet. He was going to face them alone. "You're not alone," Aaron whispered, though no one could hear him. The soldier turned toward the Zerethian guards, meeting their eyes with quiet resolve. "This is what it means to be human," he said. "We protect those we love, even if it costs us everything. This is our gift and our curse." The guards hesitated no longer. They turned, signaling the rest of the Zerethian forces to retreat. But it was too late. The fleet had arrived, and Captain Thorne's sacrifice had already begun. The skies erupted in blinding flashes of light as the battle began. In the chaos of the conflict, Captain Thorne fought bravely, his body battered and broken as he stood his ground against the incoming forces. It wasn't long before he fell, his body collapsing to the ground. But the time he had bought allowed the Zerethian people to escape. The child he had saved, the symbol of his sacrifice, was now safe. As the dust settled, Aaron stood in the distance, watching as the human soldier's lifeless body was carried away. His mind was in turmoil, torn between the fear of what had happened and the realization that humanity was not what he had been told. Captain Thorne had sacrificed his life for a child he had never met, for a race he had never known. And in that moment, Aaron understood the true meaning of bravery. The human soldier had shown them that humanity's greatest strength was not in their weapons or their technology, but in their capacity for selfless sacrifice. And that lesson would stay with Aaron forever. The battle raged above Kilara, the sound of exploding energy blasts filling the air. And the sky was filled with a blinding light as the Zerethian forces clashed with the invading fleet. The human soldier, Captain Thorne, had already made his ultimate sacrifice, but his last words and his actions echoed through Aaron's mind, leaving him in a state of confusion and awe. Aaron stood in the distance, watching as the smoke and fire rose into the sky, casting an orange glow over the city. His heart was heavy with grief for the man who had given his life for them. Yet a part of him could not shake the feeling that something wasn't right. He had been taught that humans were enemies, but Captain Thorne had not been the enemy. He had been a hero. He had sacrificed everything to protect a child. An alien child, someone he had no obligation to. Aaron's mind spun with the implications of what he had witnessed. Could it be that everything he had been taught about humans was wrong? As the dust settled, the Zerithian leaders gathered in the command center, trying to assess the damage and the aftermath of the attack. The guards had returned, their faces grim, their expressions etched with disbelief. The humans' fleet had been much stronger than they had anticipated, and they had been forced to retreat. But it wasn't the battle they had fought that left them all shaken. It was the truth that had come to light in the wake of Captain Thorne's death. Aaron could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him as he followed the guards into the command center. He had to know more, to understand what had really happened. His eyes scanned the room, finding the faces of the leaders and military commanders who were now discussing the aftermath of the attack. But it wasn't their words that caught his attention. It was the holographic display of the human fleet. The display showed the trajectory of the fleet's movements, the way they had approached Kilara, and the way Captain Thorne had tried to fight them off. But something was off. Aaron leaned in closer, his heart racing as he saw the sequence unfold before his eyes. "Commander, what is this?" Aaron asked, pointing at the hologram. "This fleet. It was coming for us, but now it's retreating. Why?" The commander, an older Zerithian with a stern face, glanced over at Aaron, his expression troubled. "The fleet you saw wasn't from Earth." Aaron's breath caught in his throat. "What do you mean?" The humans weren't the ones we should have feared. The fleet that attacked us wasn't human. It was another species entirely. They had somehow used Captain Thorne's ship as a diversion." Aaron's world stopped spinning for a moment. He had been so certain that the humans were the ones to fear. But now, the truth was unfolding before him in ways he hadn't imagined. "You mean to tell me that Captain Thorne, he wasn't the enemy?" "No, Aaron," the commander said gravely. "He was one of us, one of the good ones. He was trying to protect us, even though we had been taught that humanity was the enemy." The truth hit Aaron like a freight train. He had spent his whole life believing in a narrative that had been carefully crafted to instill fear, to make the Zerithians distrust humanity. But now, as he pieced together the fragments of the story, it became clear. Captain Thorne had known the real threat. The real enemy was not the humans. Far from it. It was a far darker force that had used humanity as a scapegoat, manipulating events to provoke a war between the two species. The commander continued, his voice steady, but filled with sorrow. "Captain Thorne was sent on a mission to warn us. He knew that we would fall victim to an attack from a much more dangerous enemy, a species that had been hiding in the shadows for years, waiting for the right moment to strike. They used the humans as a cover, knowing that we would think the worst of them." Aaron stood in stunned silence. He could hardly process the information. Captain Thorne's sacrifice had not been in vain. It had been part of a larger plan to expose the truth. The human soldier had been the hero, the one who had given his life to save them from a much worse fate. As the Zerithian leaders continued their discussions, Aaron's mind raced. He couldn't shake the feeling that the truth was even darker than they had realized. There had been a deep betrayal, a conspiracy that stretched far beyond what they had been told. The humans had been used, manipulated, and ultimately sacrificed by forces far greater than anyone had imagined. Suddenly, the room fell silent. A new message had appeared on the holographic display. A transmission. A video feed from Captain Thorne's ship, recorded just before the final moments of his life. The image flickered to life, and Aaron's heart skipped a beat. There on the screen was Captain Thorne, his face bruised and bloodied, but still full of that same quiet determination. "This is Captain Thorne," his voice echoed in the room. "I don't know how much time I have left, but I need to leave this message. I failed, and I know it. The attack was never supposed to happen this way. But if you're seeing this, then you know the truth now. The humans weren't the enemy. We were all played. The real threat is still out there. And it's coming for all of us. The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving the room in stunned silence. The weight of Thorne's words hung heavy in the air. The truth was out, but the fight was far from over. The true enemy was still out there, lurking in the darkness, and it was only a matter of time before they would strike again. Erin looked around the room, his eyes meeting those of the Zerethian leaders. They knew what they had to do now. The war was not over. In fact, it was just beginning. But Erin felt a strange sense of resolve settle within him. The Zerethians had been taught to fear humanity, but now he knew that fear had been misplaced. Captain Thorne had shown them the true meaning of sacrifice, and it was time to honor that by standing together against the real threat that awaited them. As Erin walked out of the command center, he knew that their world had changed forever. The truth had been revealed. And now, it was time to fight not just for Zereth, but for the future of every race in the galaxy. The human soldier had laid the foundation for an alliance, one that would stand strong in the face of the true enemy. And for the first time in his life, Erin felt a glimmer of hope. Captain Thorne had given his life. Now, it was time for them to live for something greater.